G'day, legends. I hope that you're all doing well. Now, we're going to talk about some news and, whose side that time is actually on in this war. But as always, we're going to start with the maps and some also intelligence updates coming out. So what I really want to read to you is the newest British Defence Intelligence update. And then we'll look on the map and see what this is actually looking like. So Russia's assault on the Donbass town of Bakhmut has largely stalled. This is likely primarily as a result of extreme attrition of the Russian force. Ukraine has also suffered heavy casualties during its defence. The Russian situation has also likely been made worse by tensions between the Russian Ministry of Defence and Wagner Group, both whom contribute troops in this sector. Russia has likely shifted its operational focus towards Avdiivka, south of Bakhmut, and to the Kremenasovtov sector in the north, areas where Russia likely only aspires to destabilise its front line. This suggests an overall return to a more defensive operational design after inconclusive results from its attempt to conduct a general offensive since January 2023. So, with that in mind, let's have a look at the map. But that'll be the end of our mapping today, and then we'll talk about how time and the effects on this war. So the news of today, today we heard that a Ukrainian counteroffensive may not be ready. Now, to a Japanese newspaper, when asked about expected counteroffensives, President Zelensky has said, "We can't start yet. We can't send our brave soldiers to the front line without tanks, artillery, long-range rockets. And we are waiting for ammunition to arrive from our partners. If you have the political will, you can find a way to help us. We're at war and can't wait." But there's a lot of people saying that this could be a ploy to possibly have the Russian forces not be fully prepared for that offensive and potentially make moves that could put them in positions to then be compromised. But if you see when Yevgeny Prigozhin, the leader of Wagner Group, talks about these offensives, he talks in length about where he thinks they'll come for and waiting from it. So we don't really know. But what we do know is an offensive from Ukraine is coming, and it has to come soon, as Russia continues to slowly but surely grind away at small bits of ground every day. Now, we talk a lot about military tech advantages and the outcomes of this war and how that will have an influence. But in many ways, this war has turned into a war of attrition. Attrition warfare is a military strategy consisting of belligerent attempts to win a war by wearing down the enemy to the point of collapse through continuous losses in personnel and material. And this is what we've seen over the past months in Bakhmut, Vuhledar, and now also in Avdiivka, is both sides claiming their lack of advance or a lack of withdrawal on the claim that they're killing so many of the enemy soldiers that they're fatiguing them to a point that they will be unable to launch future offensives. Now, I personally believe in at least Bakhmut, this is the case where both sides are actually correct in this, in that both sides have taken such huge losses that it's actually stalling future offensives. But that said, Russia's losses here recently have really been predominantly private Wagner Group and not Russian regular forces, although shell starvation equipment loss is a huge issue on both sides. Now, you'll hear people claim that time is on the side of the Russians or time's on the side of the Ukrainians. And the variable here is actually really public opinion and continued support of both sides, especially in Western democracies. On one hand, time benefits Ukraine, as Ukraine can continue to defend itself and retake territory for as long as the United States and Europe keep the guns and the dollars flowing into Ukraine, with many US and EU countries saying their support will last as long as it takes. Western support has its peaks and troughs, but the support's not crumbling like is being somewhat reported, especially with the current US administration. That said, the 2024 elections will have this as a focal point, and this could change. The reliance on Russian gas hasn't been as catastrophic as first thought, although prices have skyrocketed. And the longer the war goes on, the more sanctions will start to be felt in the general Russian public and potentially reduce the popular and elite support for the war and put pressure on Putin to de-escalate. Also, these sanctions are making the production of high-end technical equipment much harder and sometimes impossible to make. But on the other hand, where time benefits Russia, Ukraine's military capabilities are almost entirely dependent on continued support from the West, and especially from the United States. And Western publics could get weary of the war as the costs mount and the risk of war breaking out into a wider scale is definitely increasing. And also, if the Republican Party do get voted in 24-25, this could shift support greatly, as some European countries have only been able to donate as much as they are because the US ultimately is NATO's security and they're within that NATO bubble. Recently, Russian troops have not been on the back foot and they've actually had time to fortify the defensive positions and refill their ranks with conscripts and also professional soldiers. And Russia has a huge military-industrial complex and can still pump out a lot of equipment and a large population, and history shows Russia's willingness to use this population and to use and lose huge numbers of men. And lastly, the West has used up basically all of its leverage against Russia, other than striking Russia itself. And sanctions have so far somewhat failed to cripple the economy or the military. And Moscow continues to have strong commercial and security ties with countries like China and India, and lethal ties with Iran, North Korea, countries like that. And unlike what some outlets might say, from my research, the average Russian has not actually seen a huge decline in their day-to-day living standards. So what do you think? I think that ultimately it comes down to the USA and China, as both countries, they can continue this war deep into the future, and there are absolutely benefits for both the US and China to continue this conflict. Although I do think Russia is more willing to put their population into further hardship than the West is on average Ukrainian. So thanks, guys. I really appreciate all your support. If you'd like to support me further, there's links down below, but never feel obligated to do that. So look after yourselves, and I'll see you tomorrow or the next day. I missed yesterday because it's just a huge day, and you can hear me a bit rusty from maybe a few too many beers last night. But look after yourselves. Okay, bye-bye.